Thank you. This is a 1-minute question. After 2 years of consideration, the City Council recently voted down a proposal for a zoning change to allow higher density housing on 2600 West and 3200 South. Could the process have been changed to make a quicker decision that was satisfactory to all parties? And we start with Doug.
Probably. Government can be slow and bureaucratic, but I don't know that that's always a bad thing. I think we need time on a lot of issues for this issue specifically. The developer needs time, the residents need time, the city council and the city staff need time. The other thing that happens is when we bundle all these decisions into one and just give one massive yes or no, I think we miss some things. So when you throw out the time frame of 2 years, is that too long for decisions? Yes, but I do think that we need to make sure that decisions, especially the most important ones, are properly vetted, and sometimes those take time.
I'd just like to point out that in this particular example that you use, the process was drawn out by the developer, the applicant. The applicant has a right to slow the process down. We can't force them to speed that up. In this particular case, if that's what you want to address, then you consider that there were several developments who came before the city after they started and have concluded since. So it's not the process that was drawn out. They had the opportunity to come forward faster, but every time a developer says, no, I don't want to be heard on this meeting because I still have some work to do, I think it's a responsible thing to give them the time. So I wouldn't say the city drew this out, though it is a slow process, and I have had my frustrations that sometimes in government we can't get things done faster, especially when they are all agreed upon by all parties.
You know, sometimes things are quick and sometimes things are slow, and I think it all depends on what we're dealing with. But I came into the council in December of last year, and January was the first time I saw this proposal. And I didn't see it until it was coming up for discussion and vote last month. My feeling was that we had heard a lot of positive comments from the council preceding that. I wasn't a part of that decision. I didn't come before them. I wasn't a part of the zoning on that. But my first meeting with that was that they had received positive information from the council previously, not from me, but from another council. And I believe that it should have been taken care of with more expeditious ways, and that we may have led them along. And I hate that we do that to a developer and vilify a developer when what they're trying to do is invest in our community. I think that we have some fantastic people on our side, and I'd like to keep it that way.
Yeah, 2 years sounds like a pretty slow time for me. I've started quite a few businesses and ran them and sold a couple or two, and man, I don't know how you stay in business doing that, taking that much time for such a thing. But Dave knows more. These guys know more than I do about the history of what's been going on with that development. But my only thing is, when I sit here and watch the city council, it does seem like not a whole lot of discussion goes on, but maybe I need to come more often. But a couple of weeks ago, the developer had a meeting, if this is the same one we're talking about, had a meeting over at the golf course. And if he's true to his word, if he sat there and listened and talked to some of the citizens, and I think he came up quickly then with a plan that most of the citizens, with his shoreline development, if that's what we're talking about, that the citizens thought would work. Stop.
I believe that there's no cookie cutter mold for the process that played out. I think that if you're going to make a decision that's going to shape the lives of the rest of our future children's and children's children over the next 50 years bringing in that many units. I think that it takes great consideration and a lot of back and forth discussion. Really grateful that we had such a lively debate between citizens and the professional staff and the council. And so I think that if a decision was easy, it would be made overnight, but it was a very difficult decision, and I think that clearly is not quite thoroughly resolved at this point, but I think that you can't put a timestamp on how long it takes to make a decision that's going to have such long-term ramifications.
Thank you. This is 1 minute. Now that the Syracuse exit from the West Davis corridor is known, what should the city's land use plan envision for the area along that exit? And we start with Dave.
Well, first, Syracuse is very blessed because we actually share access to 3 exits with the West Davis corridor. We will have an exit down on Gentile, which is our southern border. We are really the only ones that it exits to. We will have an exit right here in the center of town on Antelope. And there is going to be an exit that I guess technically is going to come off around our border with West Point on 193, State Road 193, but it might as well be our exit because we're going to be the only one to the south. With those exits, the most important thing is to plan for quick development. We want to be able to access that land quickly. And I've actually been working directly. I've been the council member assigned to work with UDOT to make sure we can unlock use of that land, because problems in the past have been when UDOT develops a highway, the surplus land that is directly around those areas is locked up in a surplusing process that can take years and years. And what we've done is we've said, okay, we want to make sure that that's unlocked quickly so that people can develop it and work with it right away.
It's interesting. This is a great question. We've actually had some issues with people wanting to get rid of our general master plan, which gives us an idea of what's coming. And when we had done our previous master plan, we did not have those specific outlets and ideas of where the West Davis corridor was going to come and go. Now we do, which is why we needed to address it again and to be very specific about where those mixed use areas are going to be, where we're going to have commercial, where we're going to have town centers. So along those main roads, our corridors, our 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, those tend to be the gathering spots. We want to be able to have something that blesses the community and brings people in and out of those roads. And so at this point, we have, as a council, been addressing what we want those zones to be. Now, it is not binding. The general plan is as a guide, but our zones are showing that we need this to be town center friendly.
I suspect that those exits and whatnot would be a very good place for development of the commercial development, the easy access. And I suspect that that would be what I would push for, is commercial or business development around those points.
I think that we're at a pretty good moment to have a solid economic development plan in place. The City Council is working on that right now and tasking the staff with putting together a plan that we can all follow and unite as a council. It's really important that they put together a plan that the council can support once we are trying to recruit the appropriate development as we capitalize on this growth. If we don't have a development plan that we can unite behind, we'll go out and we'll walk the walk, but we won't, or we'll talk the talk, but we won't walk the walk when businesses come to be part of Syracuse. And so if we have an economic development strategy that's ready to go, ready to recruit, business friendly, and ready to capitalize on the new exits, I think that's the best we can do in maximizing the potential land use and the utility we have at this pivotal moment.
As Seth said it well, those are going to be areas for economic development, and I'm not business savvy or creative enough to be able to draw you a map and say, here's where a big box goes, and here's where an office space goes, and here's where a gas station goes. But that's the kind of things that need to be in there. That's the kind of places that need to drive our economic development, drive our job growth, and help keep our personal taxes from going up, because we need to balance the number of homes we allow to come here with business. And so those areas around the freeway are going to be prime areas for us to do that. And we do need to be ready, and we're working on being ready. Our economic staff calls it being shovel ready, so that we're ready to go when businesses are ready to go, and we don't have to go through a 2-year process to make that happen.
Thank you. And you mentioned the word taxes. So this is a 2-minute question. Are revenues from Syracuse taxes and fees adequate? Are residents getting the services they need? Would you support changes in local taxes? And we start with Lisa.
Thank you. That's a great question. We actually just addressed this recently. We had to make a decision of whether we keep our property taxes where they are, maintain them, or let them drop with what has happened over the past year on the county level. And we decided that in order to maintain the services that we need to provide and be financially stable as a city, we needed to maintain our taxes. Now, what this looks like for an average citizen is a raise of about $6 or $7 per home. And we really discussed this a lot, because we do not want to ever increase taxes when it is unnecessary, but we weren't going to be solvent if we didn't. It's a very difficult position that we're put in when inflation continues to raise, but because of that, property taxes decline a bit, and then we are left holding the bag for needing to take care of services that need to be provided to our citizens, but not having the same means to do it, and actually having less with an inflated price. So what we decided to do was to maintain that property tax structure, as well as, a lot of people may not understand that we do pass-through fees and taxes. So something that's charged at the county level comes through on your city bill. So you may think that we've increased your taxes or fees, which are the same. But in reality, we're just passing along what has been given to us to bill you for. So it is a really careful discussion we have constantly, and there's a lot of back and forth about it. We do not take it lightly to say, how do we stay solvent, and how do we continue to provide the required as well as the expected things that we do for the city and services that we provide, as well as our safety and our infrastructure and all of those things. So I believe that we did what was right these past meetings and decided to maintain the taxes.
Okay, I'm not so loquacious as everybody else, but I do agree with Lisa on this one, that we should just maintain the tax rate as what we have, let it go forward, and we don't need to mess around with that anymore. Like I say, I don't have a lot of words like some of these people do. But I would say, let's leave our taxes the way they are, don't raise them, and we'll do just fine with that.
So I agree, holding the rate was a good strategy. I believe that the growth that's coming, we cannot leverage our future resources, infrastructure, and all that based on user fees, permits, hookup fees for utilities and such. That's not sustainable, and so I think the best type of taxes is economic development, and having adequate businesses in place to support us through their property taxes and essentially their sales taxes that we can collect and use to support the growth that's going to be here. Police officers, fire, roads, sewer, water, all of that, that's expensive. And right now, I think most of you probably have seen, because you guys are such engaged folks, you've seen that the city gets such a small portion of your property taxes. I've heard it's less than what you'd pay a year in cable TV. But I stream, so I don't pay for cable TV right now. But it's not much, and it's not enough to sustain all the resources that we need. At one point, we've talked about sidewalks falling off roads, and that's not adequate for me and for my vision of what Syracuse looks like. And so I think the best type of taxes are going to be economic development. I'll stop there.
I too agree that we did the right thing this year in maintaining the tax rate, but just to make sure I'm being clear and honest, that does look like a tax increase to some homes if your home value went up. But I think that's something that we have to consider every year. Every year we really go through the budget with a fine-tooth comb, and we look at both revenues and expenditures to make sure that we're being wise and that those are balanced. I would not ever look for a big tax raise beyond maintaining that rate. I don't think we need that. I think we can manage with good economic development. As far as fees go, I'm a believer that the fees are a separate thing than the taxes. The fees are what we pay for water and sewer and garbage and those kind of things. And I think we've done a wise job as a council to look at those yearly to make sure that they are paying for what the service is, nothing more, nothing less. And those go up with inflation, but we look at those every year to make sure that they're covering what they should.
Well, I'm a taxpayer, as is everybody else in this room, and I don't want my bill raised. I don't want to have to pay more in taxes. So I think the only wise business move is to start by looking at what it is that I do want to pay for, and what is the actual expense of those services as expected. So when we stop and we evaluate things like, and some people don't understand there's a difference between taxes and fees, so let's just lump them together, because if you pay a fee for service, sometimes it feels like a tax. But if we do pay a fee for that service, what does it get us? And can we continue to offer that same level of service without raising the cost of that service? If we can, then we have no business raising your taxes. But if you expect water delivered to your door and it's not going to come at the same price, I think everybody still wants to pay for that water, even if it costs us passing through the 45 cents or the 25 cents that the water district adds to your bill. So we have to pass that on because you still want water and I still want to give it to you. So that's the way that works. But when it comes to other things, you have to start with really being smart about your budget. What are you getting out of the budget? And are there things in that budget that you're willing to cut? If there aren't, and it takes more money, then you have to ask the people if you're willing to pay for those things. The truth is, Syracuse is one of the lowest taxed cities in the county. We've seen the graphs, they've been presented year after year, and we pay one of the lowest per service of any. Now, sometimes people add up things and say, oh, you pay more, but because we don't pay for like a fire, it's broken out for those that don't have a fire station or things like that. But when you go service by service, it's pretty low here. And the question is, if you still want the same level of service, we just have to figure out what it takes to cover that. And that's all it should be.
Thank you. This is a 1-minute question. We start with Mike. How will you personally reach out to residents for their input? Does Syracuse provide enough opportunities, including email and social media, for public input?
Yeah, I don't know what else to do. I mean, we do have the emails, we have the phones, we have meetings, city councils, and people can come and speak with us and share their ideas. As far as reaching out and make yourself available on these social media avenues, I guess I don't know much more about how to reach out than to make myself accessible through these avenues. I'm afraid too many people don't reach out, and maybe they do need to have make sure that they know that there are avenues to contact us and reach out to us.
I agree. I think that we're in an age where everything is very accessible. I think that we have multiple mediums of ways to communicate, and I think that's great. I think we've got a diverse population here that reaches out in different ways, whether it's public input here in council meetings or attending these such meetings or reaching out on Facebook. The city does a good job of addressing the population through emails and the connection and all kinds of other methods. I think that responsive government should be reachable. I do think to some extent that there needs to be some understanding that anytime you ask a question to the city, that they need to properly vet the question and understand the answer before they just give you, spit you out any kind of answer. And so I think thoughtful responses from our council and our electeds is important. And so patience is important, being able to give appropriate answers as well, and not just giving you what you think they want to hear.
So our emails and phone numbers are published monthly in the Syracuse Connection, as well as being on the webpage. One of the things that we've worked on in the past couple of years is improving that webpage, and so we have a pretty robust webpage now with a lot of information there. And in conjunction with that, we do have the ability coming up here soon to be able to offer surveys to the citizens, and so we'll try to use those as time goes on. Our meetings are, of course, open, and we put those on YouTube now, and so you can watch them and listen to them. And then we try to seek other ways as well. For example, coming up at the Pumpkin Walk, we will be seeking input on a proposed regional park. And so as you go enjoy our park and our rec facilities at the Pumpkin Walk, you'll be able to come by and take a look at the regional park plan, and city council members will be there to take your input for that.
4 years ago when I ran for office, one of the things that frustrated me really, that really concerned me, was that occasionally I got answers from city council members. I never got answers from all of the city council members when I'd ask a question. So what I decided to do was I was going to be a different city council member, and I promised that I would respond to everyone who reached out to me during my 4 years, and I've kept that promise. Every inquiry I've received, whether it's email, text message, or phone call, got returned by the person that I was speaking to. So if you left me a name and number or an email or some way with your question, you got a response. I think that's important, and I think that people want to hear from every member. I don't think that it's, oh, well, somebody else gave them an answer, so we'll just go with that. I think that people do want to hear. I think it's a commitment that you're owed, and it's something that I can proudly say that I kept.
So reaching out to citizens is crucial. It really is. And one of the most imperative things I found is that they have the information, all of it, which is one of the reasons I tend not to go to social media very often, or if at all anymore, because it tends to lend itself to a very passionate display, which is wonderful that people care, but it can be really dangerous because oftentimes misinformation is spread when it's carried on that way. So I've asked people to contact me through email, through phone, through attending meetings, through hearing from them during the public comment sessions and times, and I am always happy to have a discussion with somebody one-on-one. There are lots of times that we'll have discussions in chamber meetings and things like that, city chamber meetings, but I think it's very important that they have all of the information in order to have an actual dialogue.
Thank you. 1 minute question. And we start with Seth. Parks and open spaces are important to Davis County residents. Are the growth plans for Syracuse providing enough open space and recreational areas for residents?
Thank you. I think that we've got I'm not 100% familiar with the current master plan and the allotted amount of green space per household or per 10,000 members of the community, but I think that we're doing a pretty good job. I think that as a member of the community who loves to recreate and use the parks, I play sports with my kids and coach them in the neighborhoods and everything. I think that there's great parks out there. One thing I would say is that sometimes the quality of the parks is not always there, and so I would like to see some improvement in that area. But I think that first making sure that the locations that we have are up to par and good quality parks is very important for me before we go on and just expand without having high quality parks in place already.
For our near future, we do own enough land, but as we plan for 2050, which is what we've been looking forward to in about 30 years, and we do that big picture plan, we're going to have some more parkland for and trail land for what our citizens enjoy now. I've mentioned earlier the regional park is something that I would like to see happen. Whether we have to phase it or it takes a while, that's all right, but we have 50 acres for that, and we need to develop that. We need to take care of what we have right now, and we need to expand the programs that we can offer in those parks as well. Our recreation department does a great job, and if we can give them more space, they're going to even do more for our residents.
Well, when it comes to parks, I don't think that anybody's going to tell you that they don't want to improve our parks or provide wonderful things. Nice spaces to recreate and make a great city. We want to have those things. Where we're short is funds. It's an expensive process to build a park. It's expensive to develop a park, to refurbish a park. So we have to be really careful with the way that we spend the money that's allocated to parks. The money that we have is specifically designated to parks. It's not like we can go and take your roads money and build a park with it, and who would want to? We want to be able to drive safely as well. But the point is that it takes an awful lot of work. And you have to be willing to go outside the box here and try and solicit maybe investors in your park, public-private partnerships, things that you can do to stretch those dollars, grants, funding that is not typical. But those kind of things actually give us a way to make more out of the dollars that we do have.
I think it is great for a community to have parks and open space. Some of the things that we have tried to do with some of the new areas, especially along the corridor, were to have some open spaces in the planned residential communities, rather than having them the space on their plot of land, the individual plots of land. It would have decreased those plots and increased open space. This makes it more affordable for the houses to be built and people to afford them. It makes it easier for them to afford them, but it also takes down from a lot size. And so that's a trade-off. We understand there are pros and cons to everything, but we just happen to be at a time where land is incredibly expensive. So we have worked for open space. We've tried to do tot lots, things like that in some of the more compressed areas, and we are working to provide open space in parks and regional parks and programmable parks.
Yes, we want park space. I think that has to be addressed and be careful with it because of this new development that we were talking about earlier. They have to jam those houses in there, and I just did not see what I would consider adequate park space. And so if the developer wants to get biggest bang for his buck, build the most houses on the least amount of land or whatever the case may be, we have to be vigilant and hold them to account that they're going to have park space in there and require them to have adequate open space or green space and not let them just continue to build and overlook this open space that we desire in our community.
Thank you. Excuse me. A 1-minute question. We start with Doug. Utah values place a high priority on keeping our children safe. Safety issues range from bullying, mental health, to drug use and gun violence. Can the City Council help with assuring children's safety?
I'll give you 2 examples that I'm involved with. The first is having school resource officers in our school buildings. I've worked in other secondary schools in our district where the local community does not provide SROs, school resource officers, and we do, and that's a commitment of money, but we feel that it's a value to have police officers in our junior high school, in our high school, and in our elementary schools. The second thing is we have a coalition called Communities That Care that has been started up, and it involves Syracuse and Clearfield and many public and private services meeting together to try to assess and aid in the needs that our youth have. And that's just coming together now, and I've just started going to the meetings, but it's going to be a wonderful asset to our community to help the youth.
There's certainly lots of ways that we can protect our youth. I think that the starting place is to make sure that the people that represent our safety, our first responders, understand that they're a part of our community. 4 years ago, we asked that they really reach out and embrace the community. Not that they weren't in the beginning, but I think that there was a heightened level of what we're getting nowadays when we have officers that make sure that they're approachable, because we want somebody to feel like they can ask a cop when there's a problem or ask a firefighter when they have a concern. These people are in our community. They're in our community a lot. I make sure that if I see one, I stop one and just make sure they notice that I notice them and that I care and that I appreciate what they do. One of the best stories that I've heard recently was from our police chief, who said that he had someone come across the street just anxious to talk to him, and he said, "Oh boy, I thought I was going to get it." And instead they said, "Can I have a hug?" Now that means that we got the right people in office. We have the right people in those first responder roles who are reaching out to protect everyone.
I'm also involved in communities that care and love what they're doing. It's a new organization, and I think we're going to really benefit from their influence in our city. Something else that I think is the city council's position that is something we can actually do is to staff our safety officers well. We just had an opportunity to approve a police officer that was requested and needed, and especially with the growth that we see every single year, we're increasing homes and families here. So we want to make sure that we have the very best staff and that they feel appreciated and that they are funded well. That's one of our very first highest priorities. Also, we can attend our public safety fairs, and our fire department is having one, in fact, this Thursday. If y'all want to bring your children, that gives them a sense of intimacy with the people who are their first connection in times of trauma and difficulty. And so I think the sooner we introduce our children to it and the more staffed we are, the better off we are.
Yeah, I agree with what Lisa had to say there. I think our firefighters and police ought to be out being more visual, allowing the kids to come by with the open houses they have at the fire station, maybe the police station, whatnot. So the kids do get used to seeing them, maybe seeing them in their uniforms or in their protective clothing, whatnot. The resource officers, again, another thing that we need to keep in the schools. But I think mostly as far as the kids and the bullying and which will go on later on in their life, is to feel like the police officers and firefighters are actually one of us, and that they do care, and that they are actually officer friendly. And I think that's a good way to do it, to have these open houses and to have, again, people that are high quality and that get that exposure to the kids.
Absolutely, we have a role in this. We all do as a community. An ounce of prevention is worth much more than a pound of treatment for these issues that are plaguing our society, guys. We think that they're not here. These people that are struggling with mental illness, substance abuse, with bullying or violence, any of that stuff. It doesn't take much to see. I work in that field, so I can speak to it. They're here. They're amongst your family members, your friends, and there's a lot we can do. Investing in the communities that care is a great first step, and supporting agencies like that to come in and work with our children, and supporting that family culture that we have here. Good, strong families is also a great protection against some of the ills that are in our society. If we're representing bullying as adults, our children will mimic that, and so I think we owe it to our future to invest in that as a society.
Thank you. Excuse me. This is the last question, but you will have a chance to summarize at the end. So it's a 1-minute question, and we start with Dave. How do successful city councils work with the numerous agencies, boards, and other elected officials with whom they interact?
I think the most successful city councils, and I recently talked with a few of my colleagues on other city councils as to who really felt like their city council was successful and who didn't. But the best city councils can allow for debate and still respect each other. They don't take things as personal. They sit and try to understand each other, because there is, and I actually wrote a response on my reporting page. I've kept a reporting page for all these years, but I think that one of the things we have to do is there is a win-win-win solution out there. Nobody is going to come out the extreme winner, because when they do, somebody's going to be a loser. And I don't think that that's the best way to operate government. I think if you're listening and working together, there is a solution where everybody wins, but you have to step back and not expect somebody to have taken advantage and beaten up on somebody else. If you want a good city council, they've got to get along, they've got to respect each other, and they've got to really be working to take care of the people.
I would say that respect is very first and foremost. If you believe that you can trust those around you, and that when you're having debate and discussion, that it is not going to be used and wielded against you in the future. I think listening is incredibly crucial. There are a lot of things that we will come to the table and have one idea in our mind, and we end up having things brought to our attention that we may not have considered. In fact, that's the majority of the time when I come to a 4-hour meeting and have come in there with one understanding and find that I don't have all of the information. And then also being careful when you send information out to the masses, that you do not make it one-sided. Even if you tend to believe one way, that you are willing to give both sides, because we know that 99.9% of things have very strong pros and cons, and sometimes it's just simply about one outweighing the other by a small margin.
Yeah, I don't pretend to be very smart. I'm not as smart as these guys. I'm not as experienced as these guys and gal. But I do agree we need to be respectful of each other. I do like the idea of going out and speaking with others. How do you run your city council? What do you do in your city? What's working with you? I like and I wish we had more people coming to these city council meetings. I like to listen to those who have comments. I think the more input we have as a city council, then that gives us a better idea, a better opportunity to mull things over and to come up with better resolutions. So the citizens actually should have a large input in what goes on in the city council, and I would invite the citizens to do that. These guys, whoever's going to run this thing, the city council, aren't the brightest crayons, or we all need input, and the citizens ought to come up and feel free to do that and share their ideas.
I wrote down a few thoughts that kind of came to my mind, and some of those were open-minded, respectful, hardworking, and willing to put in the time, flexible, willing to learn from the citizens, peers, and history, willing to weigh the opportunity costs, and being data-driven. I think looking at research, spending the time to find answers, and then willing to collaborate and share, learn, to work together, and to sometimes give up when you end up realizing that you may have made a wrong choice, and you need to come back and just kind of being humble and moving forward. But I think as a whole, you should represent a united team that comes forward to pursue the plans that are going to make Syracuse the best place possible.
I thought I heard the question leaning more towards how do we work with outside other groups, but I will just say this as a whole, that we are a big team. The 5 council members with the mayor are a team, but we can't do it ourselves. We have important team members in the city staff. The residents are an important part of our team. Cities around us, the state and county, other groups, are the schools, other services are all important parts of our team. And I think as city council members, we need to make sure that we're always willing to work as a team and be a good team player.
Thank you. So we'll start with Lisa, and this is the last summary. Please take 1 minute to tell the audience why they should vote for you.
First of all, thank you for hosting this, and thank you to our timekeepers. We appreciate keeping us on task. I'm grateful to be here with these really great individuals. It is a service to do this sort of thing. I would imagine that if it's ever crossed your mind to run for office, you might have questioned whether or not you really wanted to do that, and I think all of us have done the same. But what it comes down to is that somebody needs to be willing to serve the greater good. Somebody needs to love their community enough to do and make hard decisions and do things that they may not have ever considered they would do, but for the future generations we do, and we lead out. I've spent a grand amount of my life in service positions, from partisan politics to community councils to PTAs, and being a mother and a wife and serving my community and my church. Because of that, I know that when we invest in our community, it matters. And I am really grateful for those good men and women who are willing to put themselves in that position.
Well,
I think it's good to have change once in a while. I think sometimes perhaps we can get a little set maybe in our ways. I would encourage, like I said earlier, again, I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but the city council doesn't have all the answers, and we need more input. And I would encourage anybody who wants to run in, 2 years for city council, do it again, run. I think we have a lot of bright people out there that can do the job well, and I don't think this ought to be a lifelong career for anybody, and I think we ought to spread the wealth, allow others to have their input and their abilities to shine and to share with us. And so I think it's my turn now to at least attempt that, and to continue to help build this city, but yet maybe have fresh eyes and fresh ears.
Yes, thank you for hosting us and giving us the opportunity to speak to you. I think that by education, by profession, I am somebody who spends time poring over decisions that we make for taxpayer dollars, and that's one of the most important things we can be entrusted with, is your dollars and your trust. I think that I have a skill set that allows me to work on compromise, bringing sides together that might not normally compromise. I think bringing those people to the table is something that's important in this day and age. I said it before, I don't think zero-sum politics work. There always ends up being some loser and some winner, and that's not what we want to do here. I think we can push forward a Syracuse that's the most mutually beneficial for the majority of our citizens, and I think that's what I want to do if I was entrusted to serve you on the city council. I appreciate your support, and I'd love to earn your vote.
I have been invested in Syracuse all my life, and plan to be for the rest of my life, and this is a joy to be able to serve on the city council. I hope you'll give me a chance to continue to do so. If you don't agree with every idea I ever have or every vote I ever make, I hope you'll at least understand that I'm a team player and I'm willing to listen, and I want to do what's best for the future of Syracuse.
well, I decided to run for city council because I felt like I could serve, and I was willing to serve at a level that the city needed. The city needs people who have business experience. I can't say that enough. When you've got people who've got real world experience they can draw on from a diverse background, then there's a lot of opportunities to bring in what works and what makes sense and what's happening in business today that makes other organizations successful and financially viable. You need people who are willing to do the work, people who will do the homework. When we come together to discuss and debate, everybody should bring with them the study that they've done at home, the effort they've put into it. They're not just here to decide whether they say yay or nay, but they're people who need to be out there looking for real solutions, and then when we work together, we can find some